An hour before MY's surgery, I sat alone in the hospital hallway. I accidentally overheard MY daughter and son-in-law talking, and what they said about MY future made my heart drop. Without saying a word, I made one quiet phone call. Only later did I understand this had been planned all along. If this story already feels familiar, pause for just a moment. Tell me in the comments which city or country you're listening from. My name is Margaret Sterling. I'm 72 years old, widowed for nearly 11 years, and until recently I believed I had built a secure life for the people I loved. My husband left me comfortable, but I multiplied what we had: real estate investments, careful savings, long-term planning. I wasn't reckless, I wasn't naive. At least that's what I thought. That morning I was scheduled for heart surgery. Nothing experimental, nothing dramatic, but serious enough that the doctors insisted it shouldn't be delayed much longer. The hospital hallway was cold in that specific way hospitals always are: overlit, sterile, humming with quiet urgency. I sat in a wheelchair wearing that thin hospital gown that makes you feel like your dignity has been folded up and placed somewhere out of reach. Across from me, families whispered. Phones buzzed. Nurses walked briskly with clipboards pressed to their chests, and beside me just an hour earlier had stood my daughter, Jessica Sterling. Jessica is my only child, 45, intelligent, organized, strong-willed. She had been by my side through every appointment. She scheduled my consultations. She asked Dr. Patel detailed questions about recovery time and risks. She looked devoted. Her husband, Michael Sterling, arrived shortly after her that morning. Calm, polished, always measured in his tone. Michael works in finance. He understands paperwork, structure, assets. For years, I told friends I was lucky to have such a capable son-in-law. "Mom," Jessica had said that morning, squeezing my hand gently, "Dr. Patel is one of the best cardiologists in the city." "You're in good hands," Michael nodded. "This is routine at your age, Margaret. A few months from now, you'll barely remember today. At 72, you become aware of time differently. Surgery forces you to consider something you usually avoid thinking about: final documents, wills, power of attorney. I had already handled all of that years ago with my lawyer, Daniel Reeves, a man I've trusted for nearly 15 years. Daniel is methodical, calm. He believes in documentation and clarity. My estate was simple: structured investments, rental properties, savings accounts, everything clearly recorded. Jessica knew this. Michael knew this. I believed that transparency meant safety. About 30 minutes before I was scheduled to be taken into pre-op, Nurse Brenda, a warm, steady woman in her 50s, told me they needed to run one final check. "I'll be right back, Mrs. Sterling," she said kindly. I told her I'd wait in the hallway instead of the room. I didn't like the silence inside. It felt heavier there. Jessica and Michael stepped away to grab coffee. That's what they said. I wasn't eavesdropping. I wasn't trying to overhear anything. But hospital walls carry sound in strange ways. They were standing just beyond the corner, maybe 15 feet away. I could hear them clearly, though they must have thought they were out of range. Michael's voice came first. "Once this is done, we need to move quickly," he said quietly. Jessica replied, her tone low but sharp, "I know. I've already looked into it." My chest tightened, not from my heart condition, from the word choice. Move quickly, looked into it. Michael continued, "If she needs extended recovery, we'll have to step in immediately. We can't let things sit unmanaged." Jessica sighed. "Daniel Reeves has everything structured tightly. We need legal access if she's incapacitated." Incapacitated. They were speaking about me as if I were already gone. Michael lowered his voice even further, but I still heard him. "If she doesn't recover fully, it simplifies things. We can consolidate the properties, liquidate the downtown rentals, reinvest properly." Simplifies things. I felt something inside me shift. Jessica responded, and this is the sentence that changed everything. "Honestly, Mom's been stubborn about control for years. Maybe this is the moment things finally transition." Transition. That word echoed louder than any hospital machine. They weren't wishing me harm. They weren't plotting something criminal, but they were planning for my authority to disappear, and not in grief, in strategy. Michael spoke again. "We just need to make sure paperwork is ready. If Dr. Patel says there are complications, we push for medical decision authority. Fast." Jessica hesitated. "And if she questions it?" Michael's answer was immediate. She won't. She trusts us? That sentence didn't break my heart, it clarified it. I sat very still in that hallway. Every memory from the past 3 years began rearranging itself in my mind. The time Michael insisted on reviewing my rental income spreadsheets. The way Jessica encouraged me to simplify my portfolio by transferring oversight to them. The subtle frustration when I declined. The polite smiles when I said, I prefer to manage my own affairs. It wasn't greed in the obvious sense. It was anticipation. They were waiting for the moment my health justified taking control. Nurse Brenda returned just then, and I quickly straightened my expression. You ready, Mrs. Sterling? She asked gently. Jessica and Michael rounded the corner moments later, holding coffee cups, faces composed. Mom, you okay? Jessica asked. I smiled. Yes, sweetheart, just thinking. And I was, not about surgery, about power. I realized something very clearly in that hallway. If I went into surgery without updating anything, without safeguards, and complications occurred, temporary or not, I might wake up to find my life already reorganized. Not stolen, not illegally taken. Just transferred because I needed help. And maybe they believed they were entitled to that help. Maybe they convinced themselves it was practical, but I wasn't done living. I wasn't done deciding. As Nurse Brenda began rolling me toward pre-op, I leaned slightly toward her. Brenda, I whispered quietly, before I go in, may I make one quick phone call? She looked surprised. It'll have to be quick, Mrs. Sterling. That's all I need. She wheeled me into a small consultation room near the surgical wing and handed me my phone. My hands were steady, not trembling, steady. I scrolled to one name. Daniel Reeves, he answered on the second ring. Margaret, everything all right? Yes, I said calmly, but I need you at the hospital immediately. There was a pause. Has something happened? Yes, I replied. And I believe if I don't adjust things today, I may lose control of my estate while I'm still alive. Daniel's tone shifted instantly. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Do not sign anything. Do not authorize anything. And if you feel pressured, delay the surgery. I understand. I hung up just as Nurse Brenda knocked softly. Time, Mrs. Sterling? I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. 72, widowed, financially stable. Not confused, not fragile, and not finished. When I returned to the hallway, Jessica looked concerned. Everything okay? Yes, I said gently. Michael studied my face for a moment longer than necessary. You look different, he said. I am, I replied. Dr. Patel approached shortly after, reviewing my chart. We're ready when you are, Mrs. Sterling. I smiled at him. Doctor, I've decided to postpone the surgery until tomorrow. Jessica's head snapped toward me. Mom, what? It's just one day, I said calmly. I need to meet with my lawyer first. The silence between the three of us was sharper than any scalpel in that building. Michael recovered first. Is that really necessary? Yes, I answered. And for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not concern, calculation. Jessica forced a smile. Of course, Mom, whatever makes you comfortable. But her grip on her coffee cup tightened. Dr. Patel nodded professionally. We can reschedule for tomorrow morning. Nurse Brenda gave me a small, knowing look, as if she sensed more than I'd said. As they wheeled me back toward my room, I understood something clearly. I wasn't afraid of surgery anymore. I was afraid of becoming convenient. And in that hallway, before any anesthesia touched my veins, I had made one quiet decision. If anyone was going to decide the future of Margaret Sterling, it would be Margaret Sterling. And Daniel Reeves would make sure of it. But what I didn't yet know was this: postponing the surgery was only the beginning. Because when Jessica and Michael realized why I made that call, their next move would show me just how long they'd been preparing for mine. The hallway felt colder after Jessica and Michael walked away. It wasn't the temperature. It was the realization. I remained seated, hands folded in my lap, staring at the glossy hospital floor while their words replayed in my mind, calm, measured, disturbingly practical. They hadn't sounded emotional. They hadn't sounded worried. They had sounded organized. Nurse Brenda stepped out from behind the desk and approached me gently. Mrs. Sterling, we're about 30 minutes from prep. Are you feeling all right? Her tone was kind, grounded. Human, yes, I said, forcing a small smile. Just thinking. She nodded knowingly. That's normal before surgery. If only she knew what I was thinking about. I stood slowly and followed her down the corridor toward the pre-op room. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of my heart condition, but because something far more unsettling had just shifted inside me. Jessica and Michael thought I didn't know. That was their first mistake. Inside the pre-op room, Nurse Brenda helped me into the hospital gown. The thin fabric felt like surrender. She attached a monitor to my finger. "Your blood pressure is stable," she said. "Dr. Patel will come by shortly to review everything." Dr. Patel, my cardiologist, calm, reputable, professional. The surgery itself didn't frighten me anymore. What frightened me was what would happen after. Because what I overheard wasn't about the operation. It was about what came next. Recovery decisions, legal control, temporary financial management, power of attorney while she's sedated. They weren't planning my death. They were planning my absence. And there is something deeply unsettling about realizing people are preparing for your vulnerability instead of your survival. Dr. Patel entered a few minutes later, chart in hand. "Margaret Sterling," he said warmly, "we're ready whenever you are." He reviewed the procedure calmly, professionally. Risks, recovery time, expected monitoring. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, nothing dramatic. This wasn't some criminal conspiracy, it was something quieter, more civilized, more strategic. "Do you have any final questions?" Dr. Patel asked. I held his gaze for a moment. "Doctor," I said carefully, "after surgery, how long am I typically sedated?" "Usually several hours, sometimes longer if needed." "Why?" "And during that time," I continued gently, "who is authorized to make decisions?" "Only if you have previously assigned someone medical power of attorney." "I see." I didn't have one assigned. "Not officially, not yet." Dr. Patel smiled reassuringly. "Everything will go smoothly." I nodded. "Yes, I'm sure it will." But smooth for whom? Nurse Brenda stepped out briefly to retrieve paperwork. That was my window. I reached for my phone inside my handbag, the one Jessica had insisted she hold for me earlier. But when I looked beside the chair, it wasn't there. My handbag was gone. My pulse quickened. Jessica had taken it when she said she'd keep it safe. Of course she did. I didn't panic. Panic is loud, strategy is quiet. "Nurse Brenda," I said when she returned, "I need to make a phone call before surgery." "We're on a tight schedule," she replied kindly. "It will take less than 2 minutes." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I'll step outside for a moment." She handed me the hospital landline phone, and that's when I made one quiet call. Daniel Reeves answered on the second ring. "Daniel Reeves speaking?" "It's Margaret Sterling." Silence, then warmth. "Margaret, is everything all right? I thought you were in surgery." "I will be," I said evenly, "in about 20 minutes. What's wrong?" "I need you to listen carefully. And I need you not to react emotionally." His voice changed immediately, sharper, focused. "I'm listening." I overheard Jessica and Michael in the hallway discussing financial control during my recovery. "They've been planning temporary management of my assets while I'm sedated." A pause. "That's concerning." "They mentioned documentation." Another pause. "Do they have access to anything?" "No official authority," I replied. "But they believe they will." Daniel's tone hardened slightly. "Margaret, did you sign anything recently?" "No." "Good. I need you to do something for me," I continued. "Immediately freeze any external financial authorization changes. No temporary control transfers, no emergency modifications. Nothing gets processed without your direct confirmation." "Done," he said without hesitation. "And Daniel, yes, if I am listed as temporarily incapacitated after surgery, I want written verification of any request submitted under my name." "You suspect they'll try to move quickly?" "I suspect they believe I won't notice." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Margaret, do you want to postpone the surgery?" I thought about that carefully. "No," I said, "my heart still needs repair, but my estate does not." "Understood." "One more thing," I added. "If anything unusual is filed in the next 48 hours, any document, any attempt to access accounts, you call me directly, not Jessica, not Michael." "Of course." "And Daniel?" "Yes, they have absolutely no idea who they're really dealing with." For the first time since I'd overheard that conversation, I felt steady. "Understood," he said quietly. I hung up. Nurse Brenda returned moments later. "All set?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "All set." Jessica and Michael reappeared shortly after. Jessica's eyes were glossy, concerned. Michael's posture was composed, supportive. "Mom," Jessica whispered, squeezing my hand, "we're right here." I know, I said gently. Michael leaned closer. Everything will be taken care of while you recover. You just focus on getting better. I held his gaze. Oh, I will. He didn't notice the difference in my tone. That was their second mistake. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I felt strangely peaceful. Because here is the truth about betrayal. It is not the shock that empowers you. It is the clarity. Jessica thought she was being protective. Michael thought he was being proactive, but neither of them understood something fundamental about me. I had built everything they were quietly calculating. After William Sterling died 15 years ago, I didn't collapse, I didn't depend, I expanded, I learned, I protected, and I never ever surrendered control. Not then, not now. The doors to the operating room opened, bright lights. Sterile air, Dr. Patel adjusting his gloves, Nurse Brenda reassuring me softly. Count backwards from 10, the anesthesiologist said. 10, 9, 8. As the room blurred, one final thought passed through my mind. If they thought surgery made me vulnerable, they had miscalculated, because the real shift had already happened. And when I wake up, everything will be different. What Jessica and Michael don't realize yet is that this surgery isn't the turning point. The paperwork is. And tomorrow morning, they're going to discover that the future they were quietly arranging no longer belongs to them. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not hospital quiet, the kind filled with distant footsteps and rolling carts, but internal quiet, the kind that comes after a decision has already been made. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim recovery room lights. A steady monitor beeped beside me. My chest felt heavy, but not in pain, just in healing. Mrs. Sterling, a gentle voice said. Nurse Brenda. I turned my head slightly. I'm here, she smiled. Surgery went very well. Dr. Patel said everything was exactly as planned. Exactly as planned. For once, I was grateful that something had gone according to design. How long? I whispered. About 4 hours total. You've been in recovery for almost an hour. An hour. An hour where Jessica and Michael believed I was unconscious. An hour where they might have been making calls. An hour where they might have tried to move something quietly. Is my daughter here? I asked. Yes, Nurse Brenda replied. Jessica and Michael have been asking every 10 minutes if you're awake. Of course they have. Let them know I'm resting, I said gently. I'd like a few minutes first. She studied me for a moment, perhaps sensing something different in my tone, but she simply nodded. Of course. When she left, I stared at the ceiling and let the reality settle. They didn't want me gone. They wanted me manageable. There is a difference. A subtle one and much more dangerous. I reached slowly for the call button and pressed it again. When Nurse Brenda returned, I asked, May I have my phone? It was with your daughter, she replied. But I'll ask her to bring it. No, I said calmly. Please retrieve it directly from her and bring it to me. She hesitated, then nodded. Within minutes, she returned with my handbag. Unopened, untouched, at least on the surface. I took my phone and immediately saw 3 missed calls, all from Daniel Reeves. I didn't panic. I called him back. He answered instantly. Margaret, I'm awake, I said, a brief pause of relief. Good. Report. His tone shifted. Professional, precise. 40 minutes after your surgery began, an inquiry was made to your primary investment account regarding temporary authorization access. My pulse steadied instead of spiking. By whom? Michael Sterling. There it was. What reason? Claimed he needed emergency financial oversight in case of prolonged incapacitation. I closed my eyes briefly. How did he attempt it? Through a private banking contact. It was declined. Because I froze all external authorization changes exactly as you requested. Good. And then, 20 minutes later, Jessica contacted my office asking for a copy of your most recent will. Of course she did. And what did you tell her? That I cannot release estate documents without your direct consent. Silence, measured, heavy. They moved quickly, Daniel said quietly. Yes, I replied, they did. But they failed. Yes, I said again. They did. I ended the call just as Jessica entered the room. Her face was composed, but too composed. Mom, she breathed, moving toward me. Oh, thank God you're awake. She leaned down to hug me carefully, mindful of the surgical site. I'm here, I said gently. Michael followed behind her. How are you feeling? He asked, voice calm and reassuring. Clear, I replied. That word lingered. Michael smiled. That's wonderful. We were just discussing what arrangements we'd need to make if recovery took longer than expected. I looked directly at him. Arrangements? I asked softly. For the properties, he said smoothly. Just in case, I repeated. Jessica squeezed my hand. We only want to help, Mom. You shouldn't have to worry about anything while you heal. That's when I understood something crucial. They believed they were justified. In their minds, they weren't stealing, they were securing, and entitlement always disguises itself as concern. I appreciate that, I said calmly, but I've already made arrangements. Their expressions shifted, subtle but visible. You have? Jessica asked. Yes, Daniel Reeves is handling everything. Michael's jaw tightened for half a second before he recovered. Of course, he said, your lawyer. Yes, I replied, my lawyer. Silence filled the room, not tense, but recalibrating. Jessica sat down beside the bed. Mom, you trust us, right? There it was, the real question, trust. I trust that you care about stability, I said evenly. She blinked. What does that mean? It means, I continued, that you worry about security. Michael stepped closer. We worry about you. I know, I said gently, and I did. In their own way, they did worry, but not about me, about inheritance. About continuity, about control. The monitors continued their steady rhythm. Jessica glanced at Michael. A silent exchange. A recalculation. You must be exhausted, she said suddenly. We'll step out and let you rest. Before you go, I said softly. They both paused. I need to clarify something. They waited. There will be no temporary financial authority transferred to anyone during my recovery. Michael's expression stiffened. Of course, he replied quickly. No power of attorney discussions, I continued. No document reviews, no asset management conversations. Jessica's smile faltered. Mom, we weren't trying to. I know, I interrupted gently. You were planning, Michael straightened. Planning isn't wrong. No, I agreed, but assumption is. Silence, heavy. You assumed vulnerability, I said quietly. That was premature. Jessica's face flushed slightly. Mom, you're overthinking this. No, I replied calmly. I'm recovering. They didn't know how to respond to that, so they nodded and left. The door closed softly behind them. Nurse Brenda returned a few minutes later to check my vitals. You seem very alert, she said. I am. Most patients are groggy much longer. I've had a clarifying morning. She smiled without understanding, and that was fine. Because clarity doesn't need witnesses. Later that evening, Daniel Reeves arrived in person. He stood at the foot of my bed, hands folded. I wanted to see you myself. Report, I said again quietly. He almost smiled. No further attempts, but they will try again. I know, you're going to need to make a larger decision soon. Yes, I replied, I am. He hesitated. Margaret, are you considering restructuring? I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Yes, because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about alignment. If my daughter and son-in-law saw my temporary sedation as opportunity, then they had revealed something irreversible. When Daniel left, I lay awake, watching the ceiling lights dim for the night. Jessica thought she could secure the future by anticipating my absence. Michael thought he could accelerate control through timing. But what they don't understand yet is that I am not a transitional phase in their financial timeline. I am the architect of it. And tomorrow, I will begin drafting a future they did not see coming. Because when someone shows you how they prepare for your weakness, you respond from your strength. And mine is only just beginning to surface. By the second morning after surgery, the hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like a waiting room for decisions. Sunlight filtered through the thin blinds in pale strips across the floor. The steady beeping of the monitor beside my bed had become background noise, predictable, controlled, unlike the tension quietly building beneath the surface of my family. Nurse Brenda adjusted my IV with her usual gentle efficiency. You're recovering beautifully, Mrs. Sterling, she said. Dr. Patel may even discharge you sooner than expected. Sooner is good, I replied. Sooner meant movement. Sooner meant leverage. After she left, I checked my phone, one message from Daniel Reeves. We need to talk before discharge. I called him immediately. He answered in his calm, measured tone. Margaret, report. There was another attempt. From Michael, yes, this time through a property management liaison. He requested copies of rental agreements for tax preparation purposes. And denied. Good, there was a pause. Margaret, Daniel continued carefully, this isn't random. They're not panicking, they're probing. I already knew that. They're testing the edges, I said. Yes. Then we tighten them. Another pause, approving this time. I suggest we meet in person today, Daniel said, before Jessica or Michael can schedule anything of their own. Come to the hospital, I replied. Jessica arrived shortly after with Leo and Sophie. My grandchildren rushed into the room with innocent excitement, their small shoes squeaking slightly against the polished hospital floor. Grandma, Sophie squealed, climbing carefully onto the edge of the bed. Leo hovered closer, quieter but observant. Dad said you're almost fixed. Almost, I smiled. Jessica stood behind them, posture composed, smile polished. See, she said brightly. Everything is fine. Michael followed a few steps later, holding a paper coffee cup, expression relaxed, too relaxed. How's the heart? He asked casually. Beating, I replied evenly. He chuckled lightly. I watched them interact with the children, normal, warm, familiar. And yet beneath it all, there was something newly visible to me. Every gesture from Michael felt slightly calculated. Every reassuring word from Jessica felt slightly timed. Not cruel, not dramatic, just strategic. Mom, Jessica said once the children were distracted with the hospital television, we've been thinking. Of course you have. About what? I asked calmly. Well, recovery, you shouldn't go home alone. I won't, I replied. Michael blinked. You won't? No, Jessica frowned slightly. Then where? With assistance, I said. What kind of assistance? Michael asked carefully. The kind arranged by Daniel Reeves. That name landed again, subtle but heavy. Jessica's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. You don't need lawyers for home care, Mom. I need oversight, I corrected gently. Silence stretched across the room. Leo turned down the television volume instinctively, sensing the shift without understanding it. Michael set his coffee cup on the windowsill. Margaret, we're just trying to help. I know, I said, but I've already handled it. Jessica crossed her arms lightly, defensive posture disguised as concern. You think we're trying to do something, she said. I think, I replied slowly, that you were preparing for a scenario that hadn't happened yet. Michael exhaled sharply through his nose. That's called planning. No, I corrected calmly. That's called presuming. The air tightened. Leo glanced between us. Sophie looked confused. Jessica forced a soft laugh. Mom, you're being dramatic. Am I? I asked gently. She hesitated. Michael stepped closer to the bed. You overheard part of a conversation you're misinterpreting? I didn't misinterpret numbers, I said quietly. Silence. He didn't answer. Jessica's eyes flickered to him. There it was again, that silent recalculation between them. Before the tension could escalate further, Nurse Brenda knocked lightly and entered. Mrs. Sterling, she said, you have another visitor. Daniel Reeves stepped into the doorway, professional, composed, precise. Jessica's expression changed immediately. Daniel, she said, we didn't know you were coming. That's correct, he replied smoothly. He moved to the foot of my bed and addressed me directly. Margaret. Daniel, Jessica shifted uncomfortably. Is this necessary? Yes, Daniel answered before I could. Michael straightened. We're her family. And I'm her counsel, Daniel replied. The distinction hung clearly in the room. Leo and Sophie sensed the shift fully now. Dad, Leo whispered, why is everyone talking like that? Jessica quickly ushered the children toward the hallway. Why don't we get you both a snack? Once they stepped out, the room felt heavier. Daniel placed a thin folder on the bedside tray. I've prepared preliminary documents, he said calmly. Jessica stared at the folder. What documents? Restructuring documents. Michael's jaw tightened. Restructuring what? Jessica demanded. My estate, I answered. The word estate changed the temperature entirely. Jessica's voice rose slightly. Over what? A misunderstanding? Daniel remained composed. This isn't reactionary. It's preventative. Michael stepped forward. Margaret, this is ridiculous. No, I said softly. It's deliberate. Jessica's eyes filled not fully with tears but with wounded pride. You think we're after your money? I think, I replied steadily, you were preparing to control it. Michael's patience thinned. You were under anesthesia, you don't even know what you heard. I held his gaze. I heard enough. Silence. Daniel opened the folder slowly. Margaret's assets will be placed into an irrevocable trust effective immediately. Jessica froze. What? Management authority will be transferred to an independent fiduciary, Daniel continued. Neither Jessica Sterling nor Michael Sterling will have direct oversight or access. Michael's voice hardened. You can't just cut out your own daughter. I'm not cutting her out, I said quietly. I'm protecting myself. Jessica shook her head in disbelief. This is insane. No, Daniel said evenly. This is structural. Michael's voice lowered. You're punishing us. I'm stabilizing boundaries, I replied. Jessica stepped back as if physically struck. You don't trust us anymore. I didn't answer immediately. Because that was the truth, and truth does not need to be dramatized. It's not about trust, I said finally. It's about alignment. Michael laughed under his breath. You've let a lawyer poison your head. No, I replied calmly. You clarified it? Daniel closed the folder. These documents will be finalized upon discharge. Jessica stared at me as if seeing a stranger. You're choosing paperwork over family. I'm choosing clarity over assumption. Silence. Long, cold, Michael grabbed Jessica's arm lightly. Let's go. As they walked out, I heard Jessica whisper sharply, this isn't over. And I believed her, but something inside me felt steady, unmoved. Daniel waited until the door closed. You understand this will escalate, he said quietly. Yes. And you're prepared? Yes, he nodded once. Then we proceed. After he left, I leaned back against the pillows. My chest ached slightly, healing muscles, not broken trust. Because something had shifted permanently. Jessica thought I was fragile. Michael thought timing was leverage. But what they failed to understand is that surgery didn't weaken me, it sharpened me. And now that the trust is being restructured, the real consequences are just beginning to surface. What Jessica and Michael don't realize yet is that once financial control is removed, influence disappears with it. And tomorrow, they're going to feel that shift in ways they never anticipated. The morning I was discharged, the air outside the hospital felt sharper than I remembered, not colder, clearer. Daniel Reeves stood beside me near the entrance as the orderly handed me my small overnight bag. Jessica and Michael were there too, positioned carefully, not close enough to appear controlling, not distant enough to look detached. Leo and Sophie waved from the bench near the parking lot. Grandma's coming home, Sophie announced loudly. Home, interesting word. Michael stepped forward first. We'll take you, he said smoothly. The car's right here. No, I replied gently. Jessica blinked. No, I have arrangements. Daniel adjusted his coat sleeve. Margaret will be transported to her residence by a private medical service. It's already scheduled. Michael's smile thinned. You don't trust me to drive? It's not about trust, I answered calmly. It's about structure. Jessica exhaled sharply through her nose. Mom, this is becoming excessive? No, I said evenly. This is becoming organized. The transport vehicle pulled up, discreet, professional, impersonal, not family, not emotional, intentional. Leo ran up and hugged me quickly. Are you still coming Sunday? Yes, I said softly, but Sunday may look a little different. He didn't understand. That was a mercy. My house felt larger when I stepped inside, not empty. Just spacious in a way it hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't expecting anyone to walk in without knocking. Daniel followed me to the kitchen table and laid out a fresh stack of documents. The trust transfer will finalize today, he said. Assets, property titles, rental streams, all redirected. And oversight? I asked. Assigned to Whitmore Fiduciary Services, independent. No family access? Good, he studied me carefully. Margaret, once this is filed, they lose leverage permanently. I'm aware, they may escalate emotionally, they already have. He gave a slight nod. And the grandchildren? I asked quietly. A separate educational trust has been drafted for Leo and Sophie. Funds accessible only for tuition, healthcare, and structured milestones. Jessica and Michael, no access. That settled something inside me. Not revenge, not punishment, protection. By late afternoon, Jessica called. Her voice was tight. Mom, we need to talk. You're talking, not like this. Like what? Through lawyers. That was your choice, I replied calmly. No, it wasn't. Jessica, I said gently, an hour before my surgery you discussed financial outcomes. Silence. You're twisting that, she snapped. Am I? Michael's voice came faintly in the background. Coaching, she returned sharper. You're destroying this family over paranoia. No, I said evenly, I'm restructuring it. You put everything in a trust. Yes, you cut us out. No, then what do you call it? I call it removing urgency. She went quiet. That was the first time I heard uncertainty in her. You don't need to control what isn't disappearing, I continued. You think we wanted you gone? She asked, voice shaking. I think you were prepared for it. That's not the same thing. It is when money is involved. She hung up, not dramatically, just abruptly. 2 days later, Michael showed up alone. He knocked this time. That alone was progress. I opened the door but did not invite him in immediately. Can we talk? He asked. We are. His jaw flexed slightly. You've humiliated us. No, I said, you exposed yourselves. He exhaled sharply. You think you're smarter than everyone? No, just cautious. He shifted his weight. Jessica hasn't slept. I slept very well, I replied. That's cold. No, I corrected. That's clarity. He looked at me carefully now, not dismissive, not arrogant, evaluating. You're serious about the trust. Yes, and the grandchildren's funds? Protected. You're punishing us financially. I'm protecting myself legally. Silence stretched between us. You know, he said finally, people will think you're unstable. I almost smiled. Let them. His eyes narrowed slightly. That's not a threat, he said quickly. It sounded like positioning. He didn't deny it. For a moment, I saw something real in him, not the charming son-in-law, not the polished financial planner, just a man who miscalculated. You've left us exposed, he said quietly. No, I replied. You left yourselves dependent. That landed, harder than anything else I'd said. He stared at me for a long moment. You're not going to reverse this. No, and you won't apologize. For protecting myself? Silence again. He stepped back. This isn't over. I nodded calmly. I know. He left without slamming the door. Progress. That evening, Daniel called their consulting counsel, he said. Expected, they're exploring contesting capacity. I almost laughed. After Dr. Patel's evaluations? Yes, they'll lose. Likely, but they may attempt reputational pressure. Let them, I said. He paused. You're remarkably steady? I had a week to think in a hospital hallway. He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. Sunday arrived. Leo and Sophie came alone this time. Jessica waited in the car at the curb. Sophie ran in first, smiling as if nothing had shifted. Leo followed, observant as ever. We baked cookies. We talked about school. Normal, careful, contained. Halfway through the afternoon, Leo looked at me quietly. Grandma, Dad's mad. I know. Did you do something? Yes. What? I made sure we're safe. He thought about that, then nodded slowly, as if that answer made sense to him. Children understand security instinctively. Adults complicate it. When Jessica picked them up, she didn't get out of the car. That distance spoke louder than anything else. That night I walked through my house slowly. Every room felt grounded, stable, not because of money. Because of boundaries. Jessica believes this is temporary. Michael believes there's still a strategy. But what they haven't realized yet is that the trust wasn't just legal paperwork. It was a shift in power. And when financial dependency disappears, so does performance. They're going to learn very quickly who they are without access, and whether they can stand in that truth without trying to take something from me again. 3 weeks passed without Jessica calling. Not once. Not even to argue. Silence can mean many things: reflection, strategy, resentment. In Jessica's case, I suspected it was a combination of all three. Leo and Sophie still came on Sundays. Michael usually stayed in the car now. Jessica sometimes walked them to the door but never crossed the threshold. That was deliberate. She wanted to signal distance without appearing hostile in front of the children. It was careful, calculated. I recognized it because I had done something similar once years ago when William Sterling, my late husband, had disagreed with a business partner but refused to escalate publicly. Sometimes restraint isn't weakness, it's positioning. On a Wednesday morning, Daniel Reeves called again. They've officially filed, he said without preamble. On what grounds? Petition to review your mental competency and to challenge the restructuring of your estate. I leaned back in my chair. So we begin? Yes. They're claiming cognitive decline? Yes. Gradual confusion, impaired judgment, paranoia. I almost smiled. And what examples are they using? Daniel hesitated briefly. They're citing your irrational belief that they were financially opportunistic before your surgery. That word lingered. Belief. They don't deny asking about financial authority, I asked. No, they're framing it as responsible preparation. Exactly. I walked slowly toward the window overlooking my garden. And the court? Preliminary review hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Time enough for rumors to circulate. Time enough for neighbors to whisper. Time enough for Jessica to position herself as the concerned daughter protecting her aging mother. They're trying to regain leverage through optics, I said quietly. Yes, good. Daniel paused. Good, yes, because optics can be documented. He didn't argue. Start assembling medical records, I continued. Full cognitive assessments, independent neurological evaluation. Dr. Patel's surgical reports, anything that demonstrates lucidity. Already underway. And Daniel, yes, file countersuit for harassment if this escalates. Another pause. You're not angry, he observed. No, you're strategic. Yes, that was the difference. The first letter arrived 2 days later, handwritten, Jessica's handwriting. I didn't open it immediately. I placed it on the kitchen table and made tea first. Some decisions require calm. When I finally unfolded it, the tone surprised me. Not defensive, not accusatory, soft. Mom, I don't recognize you anymore. You've become distant and cold. Michael only asked about finances because we were scared. You were going into surgery. We thought you might not wake up. Isn't that what responsible families do? Prepare, you're treating us like criminals. It hurts. The kids feel the tension. They don't understand why everything changed. Please reconsider. We love you, Jessica. I read it twice. There were no threats, no legal references, no accusations, just repositioning. I folded it carefully and placed it back on the table. She wasn't entirely wrong. They were scared, but fear reveals priorities. And their first instinct had not been my comfort, it had been asset control. There is a difference. That Sunday, Jessica got out of the car. Progress. She walked Leo and Sophie to the porch and lingered. Can we talk? She asked. We are, I replied gently, not in front of them. I looked at the children. Inside, wash your hands. They disappeared into the house. Jessica remained on the porch, arms crossed lightly, not defensive, but contained. You're really going through with the competency hearing? She asked. I didn't file it. You know what I mean. Yes, she inhaled slowly. Mom, if this goes to court, it becomes public record. I'm aware. People will talk. They already do, she hesitated. You're forcing us into something ugly. No, I corrected. You initiated it. Her eyes flashed. We were trying to protect you. From what? From uncertainty, and in doing so, you created it. Silence. The wind shifted slightly across the porch. You've always been decisive, she said quietly. Even when Dad was alive. William, his name still softened something in me. Yes, I said, and your father respected that. You're not him? No, and Michael isn't Dad? No, there it was, the comparison she had been avoiding. You think Michael manipulated me, she said suddenly. I think you both calculated. That's insulting. It's accurate. She looked away. For a moment, I saw her at 8 years old, stubborn, proud, desperate to prove herself right. You don't trust him, she said. I don't trust urgency around money. She swallowed. You really think we'd hurt you? No, I said calmly. I think you'd rationalize. That hit, harder than any accusation. Her eyes glistened briefly. You've already decided who we are, she whispered. No, I replied. You showed me. Tears welled but didn't fall. You're going to regret pushing us away. I'm not pushing, I'm stabilizing. She shook her head slowly. The kids feel it. They feel tension, not truth. And whose fault is that? Not mine. She stepped back slightly. You've made this about power. No, I said softly. I made it about clarity. She didn't respond. Instead, she straightened her posture. We'll see you in court. There was no venom in it, just resignation. She left. That evening, Daniel called again. They've hired a cognitive specialist to testify. Good, you're remarkably calm. I have nothing to hide. They'll argue paranoia. They'll need evidence. He paused. Margaret, are you certain you never exaggerated what you overheard? The question was professional, not accusatory. I am certain. And you documented nothing? No, he sighed lightly. It would have strengthened your position? I didn't need documentation, I replied. I needed awareness. He didn't fully understand that, but I did. A week later, Dr. Patel conducted a full neurological evaluation at my request. Memory recall, pattern recognition, logical sequencing, delayed response analysis. I passed each assessment without hesitation. Afterward, he removed his glasses and studied me. Margaret, he said gently, are you under unusual stress? Yes. From family? Yes. He nodded slowly. Your cognition is intact. I know, you're sharper than most 60-year-olds. That helps, he smiled faintly. It will. Meanwhile, Michael attempted a different tactic. He sent a polite email requesting family mediation. No legal threats, no financial references, just the word reconciliation. Interesting, I forwarded it to Daniel. Do we respond? He asked. Yes. What do you want to say? Nothing. Silence can be a response. By the 5th week, the narrative had begun circulating in our social circle. Concerned daughter worried about aging mother's mental decline. Sympathetic son-in-law trying to maintain stability. I received 3 calls from acquaintances asking gently if I was feeling well. I answered each one calmly. Yes, perfectly. Rumors collapse under steady truth. The night before the preliminary hearing, I sat alone in the living room. William's photograph rested on the mantel. You'd find this predictable, I murmured quietly. He had always said something simple. Money doesn't create character, it reveals it. Jessica believes she is fighting for fairness. Michael believes he is defending stability. But tomorrow, the court won't evaluate their intentions. It will evaluate my mind. And that is where they miscalculated because they assumed vulnerability. They mistook surgery for weakness. They mistook age for decline. They mistook preparation for paranoia. Tomorrow, they will discover something they did not expect. I am not defending my sanity, I am demonstrating their impatience. And impatience leaves fingerprints. The morning of the hearing arrived without drama, no thunder, no shaking hands, just quiet resolve. Daniel Reeves met me outside the courthouse steps at precisely 8:45 am, briefcase in hand, expression steady. You look composed, he said. I am, I replied. Inside, the hallway buzzed with low murmurs. Lawyers reviewing notes, families whispering, the faint echo of footsteps against polished floors, and then I saw them. Jessica stood near the far wall, dressed in navy, understated and sympathetic. Michael beside her in a tailored gray suit, posture controlled, eyes scanning the room. They looked prepared. So was I. Leo and Sophie were not there. That was deliberate. Jessica wouldn't risk the optics of involving the children in a competency hearing. Not yet. When she noticed me, her expression softened into something almost pleading. Mom, she said, stepping forward slightly. Jessica, Michael gave a short nod. Margaret, we stood in that narrow space between familiarity and opposition. This doesn't have to be hostile, Jessica said quietly. It already is, I replied gently. She flinched, not visibly but internally. We're not attacking you, Michael added smoothly. We're ensuring long-term clarity. Daniel shifted beside me. That's the court's role today. Michael's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. The bailiff called our case. Inside the courtroom, everything felt clinical, measured. The judge, mid-50s, composed, reviewed the petition. Mrs. Margaret Sterling, he began, your daughter and son-in-law have filed a request for competency review concerning recent financial restructuring decisions. Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand the nature of these proceedings? I do. Do you consent to cognitive evaluation? I already completed one independently. A flicker of surprise crossed Jessica's face. Daniel handed forward the documentation from Dr. Patel and the neurologist. The judge reviewed them carefully. Comprehensive assessments, he murmured. All recent? Yes, Your Honor, Daniel replied. Voluntarily conducted? Michael's attorney stood. Your Honor, while we acknowledge these evaluations, we contend that paranoia and undue influence may not be fully captured in standard cognitive tests. Ah, there it was. Undue influence? The subtle implication that Daniel Reeves had manipulated me. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Sterling, do you feel pressured by your legal counsel to make any financial decisions? No. Do you understand the scope of your assets? Yes. Can you summarize them? I did. Property holdings, investment accounts, trust structures, revenue streams, without hesitation, without notes. The courtroom remained silent. Then the judge leaned back slightly. Mrs. Sterling, what prompted your recent restructuring? I held his gaze. Preparedness revealed assumption. He studied me. Clarify. My daughter and son-in-law inquired about asset control prior to my surgery. I realized that their urgency centered on financial continuity rather than medical support. I removed urgency by creating legal structure. The judge nodded slowly. Jessica's attorney interjected, "Your Honor, asking about finances before surgery is not proof of exploitation." "No," I agreed calmly. "It is proof of priority." Silence settled heavily. Michael shifted in his seat. The judge looked back at Jessica. "Miss Sterling, did you attempt to obtain financial authority during your mother's operation?" Jessica swallowed. "We asked about contingency planning. Did you contact her lawyer for will documentation?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "And did you attempt to access investment accounts?" Michael answered this time. "We explored options in case of incapacity." "Incapacity that had not been declared," the judge observed. Michael remained quiet. The judge tapped his pen lightly. "Mrs. Sterling appears cognitively sound," he said finally. "Comprehensive testing supports that conclusion. The court sees no immediate grounds for guardianship or asset intervention." Jessica's shoulders dropped. "Not dramatically, just slightly." "The petition for competency review is dismissed," the judge continued. "However, I strongly encourage private mediation to address family conflict before further escalation." The gavel struck. Not loudly, but decisively. Outside the courtroom, Jessica approached me before anyone else could. "You won," she said quietly. "This wasn't about winning. It feels like it." "Then examine why," her eyes flashed. "You made us look greedy. I didn't make you do anything." Michael stepped forward, face composed but colder now. "You've damaged trust permanently," he said. "No," I replied, "you did." He held my gaze. "This won't be forgotten." "It shouldn't be." Daniel placed a gentle hand at my back. "We're done here." As we walked toward the exit, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, relief. The courtroom had not decided my family's integrity. It had confirmed my autonomy. And autonomy is quiet power. Outside, reporters lingered near the steps, not many, but enough to capture headlines if they wanted. "Mrs. Sterling," one called gently, "any comment on today's ruling?" I paused. "Yes." Microphones angled closer. "I am of sound mind. I remain fully capable of managing my life. And I hope families remember that age does not equal incapacity." Short, measured, no accusations, just truth. Jessica avoided the cameras. Michael walked ahead briskly. Inside their car, I could see tension simmering. They had expected leverage, they received dismissal. That kind of loss doesn't fade quickly. That Sunday, Leo and Sophie arrived as usual, but something felt different. Leo was quieter. Sophie clung slightly tighter. "Mom and Dad were arguing," Sophie whispered while we rolled dough in the kitchen. "About what?" "About you," I smiled gently. "Grown-ups argue sometimes." "Are they mad at you?" "No," she studied my face carefully. "Are you mad at them?" The honesty of children leaves no room for performance. "No," I said softly. "I'm careful." Leo overheard and nodded faintly as if that word made sense to him. Later that afternoon, Jessica came to the door when picking them up. She didn't stay on the porch, she stepped inside. A small shift. "I didn't expect the judge to dismiss it so quickly," she admitted. "Evidence matters," I replied. She looked around the living room. "You changed nothing." "I changed structure. That feels the same." "It isn't," she hesitated. "Michael thinks you're trying to isolate us." "I'm trying to protect myself. And the kids, they are protected." She inhaled slowly. "You don't see how this feels from our side? Then tell me." She looked at me, really looked. "It feels like you don't trust us to be responsible adults." "I don't trust urgency around money," I said again. "That's not the same." "It is when control is requested before compassion." Her lips pressed together. For a moment she seemed smaller, less certain. "You've changed," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "I've clarified." She didn't argue this time. She simply nodded once and turned toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. "Michael wants mediation." "I know. Would you consider it?" I studied her carefully. "Only if it's about relationship, not assets." She hesitated, then nodded faintly. "That may be the problem." "Yes," I said quietly. "It may." She left. That night, alone in my house, I sat beside William Sterling's photograph again. "They're not evil," I murmured softly, "just impatient." And impatience paired with entitlement becomes erosion. The court dismissed their claim, but dismissal doesn't dissolve resentment. If anything, it sharpens it. Jessica believes she lost authority. Michael believes he lost leverage. And people who feel they've lost control often attempt to regain it in quieter ways. The legal battle may have paused, but the emotional one is only now beginning. And the next move will not be filed in court, it will happen somewhere far more complicated. At a family table, the mediation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Neutral office, neutral table, neutral language. Nothing about it felt neutral. Daniel Reeves sat beside me, calm as always. Across from us were Jessica and Michael, their attorney positioned slightly forward as if proximity could imply control. A licensed family mediator, soft-voiced and observant, began the session. The purpose today, she said gently, is to explore whether reconciliation and understanding are possible outside of litigation. Reconciliation. Such a gentle word for something that feels like surgery without anesthesia. Jessica spoke first. We never wanted court, she said. We wanted stability. I let her finish. Michael added, Margaret misinterpreted urgency as opportunism. I interpreted priority, I replied evenly. The mediator turned to me. Margaret, what would make you feel secure again? Time, I said. Jessica frowned. Time for what? For behavior to align with words. Silence settled. Michael leaned forward slightly. We have behaved responsibly. Responsibly toward assets, I corrected. Not toward emotion. That's unfair. No, I said calmly, it's specific. The mediator nodded slightly. Margaret, are you open to modifying the trust structure? No, the word landed firmly. Jessica inhaled sharply. So this is just punishment? It's permanence. Michael's attorney cleared his throat. Perhaps a partial restoration of access? No, I repeated, not louder, just final. The mediator shifted tactics. What do you want your relationship to look like moving forward? That question lingered longer than the others. Jessica's voice softened. I want my children to have their grandmother. They do, and I want my mother back. I'm here. No, she said, tears forming. You're not. That moment almost moved me, almost, but emotion cannot rewrite pattern. I am no longer available for assumption, I said gently. That may feel different to you. Michael sat back, frustrated now. You've made this impossible. I've made it structured. The mediator paused the session briefly to allow emotions to settle. When we resumed, I spoke more directly. I am willing to maintain consistent contact with Leo and Sophie. I am willing to attend family events. I am willing to communicate respectfully. I am not willing to revisit financial control. Jessica looked down. Michael's jaw tightened. So we just pretend this didn't happen, he asked. No, I replied. We live forward with it understood. There was no dramatic ending, no shouting, no slammed doors. The mediation concluded with polite acknowledgement and no structural changes. Sometimes resolution isn't reconciliation. It's recognition. 2 months passed, no new petitions, no financial attempts, no late-night emails about authority. Jessica began coming inside on Sundays again, not immediately, gradually. Michael remained quieter than before, watching. Assessing, Leo and Sophie flourished in the simplicity of routine. We planted tomatoes in the garden. We built a birdhouse. We read stories on the living room floor. Children don't hold grudges. They absorb tone, and the tone was calmer now. One Sunday evening after the children left, Jessica lingered. I've been thinking, she said quietly. About that day before surgery. I didn't interrupt. I was scared, she admitted. But I was also thinking about how much responsibility we'd suddenly have. Yes, and I didn't ask how you felt. No, she swallowed. I thought planning was love. It can be, I said gently. If it begins with care, she nodded faintly. Michael appeared at the doorway. Are you coming? He asked her. In a minute. He stepped inside this time, small progress. Margaret, he said evenly, we were wrong to move quickly. That was the closest to acknowledgement I would receive. I appreciate that, I replied. He met my eyes. We felt exposed. I understand. You still don't trust me. I trust behavior. He absorbed that, no argument, just acceptance. They left together. Not perfectly reconciled, but quieter. That winter, I finally scheduled my surgery properly, with full documentation, full oversight, and no urgency except medical necessity. Dr. Patel handled everything professionally. Daniel monitored every authorization. Jessica sat beside me the morning of the procedure. No mention of assets, no mention of contingency, just her hand in mine. Are you scared? She asked softly. A little. So am I. That honesty felt real. Michael arrived later, subdued, no financial questions, just we're here. That was enough. The surgery went smoothly. Recovery was steady, no legal drama, no courtroom, no suspicion. Because clarity had already been established. And clarity removes leverage. Months later, I sat in my garden watching Leo chase Sophie across the lawn. Jessica and Michael were inside helping set the table. It wasn't perfect. But it wasn't performative either. Trust doesn't return overnight, it rebuilds in increments. I still control my estate. The trusts remain untouched. The structure stands, but the urgency has faded because they learned something. Not through punishment, not through humiliation, through boundary. William Sterling used to say something simple: love without structure becomes expectation. I didn't understand that fully until now. I love my daughter, I love my grandchildren. But love does not require surrender, and age does not require concession. An hour before surgery, I overheard plans that shifted my world. I made one quiet call. And that call didn't destroy my family, it revealed it. The court dismissed their claim. The mediation clarified our limits. Time softened our pride, and now we sit at the same table again, not because nothing happened, but because it did. And we chose to face it. If there is one thing I've learned at 72, it's this: you do not have to collapse to keep the peace. You do not have to give away control to feel loved. And sometimes the quietest decision, the one made in a hospital hallway, is the one that protects everything that follows. The structure remains, the boundaries stand. And for the first time in a long time, so do I.